And development is about the people. So the people need to be properly informed. That is what helps them to make correct decisions. So last evening, I had the opportunity to talk at length about my vision for the African Union. I had made a decision to come because this position is becoming vacant next year. And after consultations, many of my friends across the continent, they felt that I should offer myself for the position of the leadership at this moment in time. We all, among those friends of mine, are Pan-Africanists. And you know, Pan-Africanism is an ideology coined sometime in the last century. Its intention is to try to emancipate the people of Africa and to raise Africa to the rest of the world level, so that African people can be treated as equal citizens of this globe. As you know, it came against the background of colonial domination of the continent. It raised the consciousness of African people to fight for their liberation. And through a bitter struggle, eventually independence was won across Africa. First, you know, the Ghana was the first African country to become independent. But before that, you need to know that Ethiopia, where we are, is the oldest African country. In other words, Ethiopia was never colonized. Ethiopia has always been independent. When the colonialists came here, they found a system of governance that was much superior to their own. So when they were in Berlin, Ethiopia was excluded in that partition of Africa. But Ethiopia also suffered in that period because of discriminations and so on. So Ethiopia played a role in supporting liberation movements across the continent. That is why the Emperor Haile Selassie, at that time, who was the head of government, invited leadership of the independent African countries and the leadership of the liberation movements to come to Addis Ababa. And Addis Ababa became the venue for the formation of Organization of African Unity here. And 2 weeks ago, to celebrate the opening of a refurbished the African. Then the founders of African Unity who were here. There were several heads of state from the country, the countries in the continent which were independent. There were several heads of state from the country, the Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah is the one who had convened the first meeting of African leaders in Accra. Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah is the one who had convened the first meeting of African leaders in Accra, Ghana, in 1958. It was here. Ahmed Sekou Touré, who had led the second independent country, that is Guinea, 1958, was here. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was also here. Leopold Sédar Senghor of Senegal was here. Houphouët-Boigny of Cote d'Ivoire was here. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria was here. And that's when Organization of African Unity was formed. They focus in helping or assisting the unliberated countries of Africa to get freedom. A movement was coined here, which is called PAFMEXA, Pan-African Freedom Movement for Eastern, Central, and Southern Africa. And they went further because in South Africa, the whites were saying that South Africa was already independent. But then it came up what was called the NIBMA, No Independence for Majority Rule. So Dar es Salaam became the headquarters of liberation of Africa. Mwalimu Nyerere gave facilities and financial support to this liberation movement. And the OAU itself here was basically mobilizing the world for the liberation of Africa. Eventually, with the fall of apartheid regime in South Africa in 1994, the rest of the continent was now liberated. OAU had accomplished its task. So it was then transformed to AU. Now AU focuses more on development, cooperation, and unity of Africa. Unity has always been there at the core, right from the days when the founding conference was held here in Addis Ababa. There was the question of unity now, African Union government now. And there are two schools of thought. One, the union government now. The other one is gradual process of unity. Start first with the regional the building block. Were the Central African Union, then you have got the Maghreb Union. These are the building blocks of United Africa. So here, AU has, since it was formed, done, I could say, a commendable work of trying to bring these African countries together and trying to deal with issues which affect the continent of Africa. If you look at my blueprint there, I've outlined critical issues. We talked about security, peace and security, because there can be no development if there's no peace. In 2013, they came up with silencing the guns. That's when they had coined the Vision 2063. In 2013, OAU was exactly 50 years old. They celebrated the golden anniversary of the movement. Now the focus of the next 50 years, that's why you have the Vision 2063. And here, number one is peace. And I think probably they were overambitious. They said they want guns to be silent by 2020. 2020 is 4 years ago. The guns were not silent then. Neither are they silent today. Now you ask, why are they not silent? And how can they be silenced? That's a challenge facing the leadership of this organization. Food security is another one. As you know, I keep on saying that Africa is the richest continent in terms of resources. But the paradox is that the richest continent is also the poorest in terms of living conditions of its people. Of course, we blame the historical past, the colonization, the domination, the exploitation of our continent. But we're saying that that was the past. What have we been able to do, and what are we able of doing to change this paradox? That is a challenge that is before us here. We have talked about inter-African trade, because in development you require first resources that we have, both natural and human resources we have. Secondly, you require market where you're going to take your goods. You need first to produce the goods and then have a market where you're going to sell them. Then you need infrastructure. InterAfrican may be a challenge because, as you know, the colonial system had partitioned Africa into smaller units and had not integrated these units. You find here it was a colony. This one was Belgian. Next to it here, this was one French. This other one here was Portuguese. This one here was English or British, and so on and so forth. And though they are neighbors, they are not communicating. There was no physical infrastructure that connected these countries. So the challenge is to how to integrate these countries so that they can be able to trade with each other. Infrastructure is a major challenge. And then barriers. You have got linguistic barriers that are imposed on our people. And then this government came up with non-tariff barriers, which has made it very difficult for goods to move from one country to the other. This is another challenge that is facing us here. You have got issues of health. As you know, we have got several pandemics which are here on the continent. How do you deal with this to make the people of the continent healthy and to deal with some of those diseases that emerge from time to time in the continent? Education is another challenge. Manpower development in the continent. Because, as you know, Africa today is the fastest growing in terms of population. Africa is the youngest continent demographically.